Welcome to Quiet English with Jacque. Slow English, timeless stories, quiet moments. Today, we continue our reading of The Dog of Flanders by Ouida. In our last episode, we saw Petrashka grow strong and healthy and become a faithful part of Nello's daily life. We also saw Nello's imagination beginning to reach beyond the simple life he knows. Today, the story turns toward Antwerp and the great artist Rubens. Ouida takes us through the streets of this ancient city and shows us how deeply the memory and greatness of Rubens are woven into Antwerp's history. So settle in, take a slow breath, and allow yourself to wander through the streets of old Antwerp with Nello and Petrashka. Let's begin. And the greatness of the mighty master still rests upon Antwerp, and wherever we turn in its narrow streets, his glory lies therein, so that all mean things are thereby transfigured. And as we pace slowly through the winding ways and by the edge of the stagnant water and through the noisome courts, his spirit abides with us, and the heroic beauty of his visions is about us, and the stones that once felt his footsteps bore his shadow seem to arise and speak of him with living voices. For the city which is the tomb of Rubens still lives to us through him and him alone. It is so quiet there by that great white sepulchre, so quiet, save only when the organ peals and the choir cries aloud the Salve Regina or the Kyrie eleison. Sure, no artist ever had a greater gravestone than that pure marble sanctuary gives to him in the heart of his birthplace, in the chancel of Saint Jacque. Without Rubens, what were Antwerp? A dirty, dusky, bustling mart which no man would ever care to look upon save the traders who do business on its wharves. With Rubens, to the whole world of men it is a sacred name, a sacred soil, a Bethlehem where a God of art saw light, a Golgotha where a God of art lies dead. O nations, closely should you treasure your great men, for by them alone will the future know of you. Flanders, in her generations, has been wise. In his life, she glorified the greatest of her sons, and in his death, she magnifies his name. But her wisdom is very rare. Now the trouble of Petrashka was this. Into these great sad piles of stones that reared their melancholy majesty above the crowded roofs, the child Nello would many and many a time enter and disappear through their dark arched portals, whilst Petrashka, left alone upon the pavement, would wearily, vainly ponder on what could be the charm which thus allured him his inseparable and beloved companion. Once or twice he did essay to see for himself, clattering up the steps with his milk cart behind him. But thereon he had been always sent back again, summarily, by a tall custodian in black clothes and silver chains of office, and fearful of bringing his little master into trouble, he dissented and remained couched patiently before the churches until such a time as the boy reappeared. It was not the fact of his going into them which disturbed Petrushka. He knew that people went to church. All the village went to the small, tumble-down gray pile opposite the red windmill. What troubled him was that little Nello always looked strangely when he came out, always very flushed or very pale, and whenever he returned home after such visitations, would sit silent and dreaming, not caring to play, but gazing out at the evening skies beyond the line of the canal, very subdued and almost sad. What was it? Wondered Petrushka. He thought it could not be good or natural for the little lad to be so grave, and in his dumb fashion he tried all he could to keep Nello by him in the sunny fields or in the busy marketplace. But to the churches Nello would go. Most often of all would he go to the great cathedral. And Petrushka, left without on the stones by the iron fragments of Quentin Matsey's gate, would stretch himself and yawn and sigh and even howl now and then, all in vain, until the doors closed and the child perforce came forth again, and winding his arms around the dog's neck, would kiss him on his broad, tawny-colored forehead and murmur always the same words. If I could only see them, Petrushka. If I could only see them. What were they? Pondered Petrushka, looking up with large, wistful, sympathetic eyes. One day, when the custodian was out of the way and the doors left ajar, he got in for a moment after his little friend and saw they. They were two great covered pictures on either side of the choir. Nello was kneeling, wrapped as in an ecstasy, before the altar picture of the Assumption. And when he noticed Petrushka and rose and drew the dog gently out into the air, his face was wet with tears, and he looked up at the veiled places as he passed them and murmured to his companion, "It is so terrible not to see them, Petrushka. Just because one is poor and cannot pay, he never meant the poor should not see them when he painted them, I am sure. He would have had us see them any day, every day, that I am sure. And they keep them shrouded there, shrouded in the dark, the beautiful things, and they never feel the light, and no eyes look on them unless rich people come and pay. If I could only see them, I would be content to die." But he could not see them, and Petrushka, well, he could not help him. For to gain the silver piece that the church exacts as the price for looking on the glories of the elevation of the cross and the descent of the cross was a thing as utterly beyond the powers of either of them as it would have been to scale the heights of the cathedral spire. They had never so much as a sou to spare. If they cleared enough to get a little wood for the stove, a little broth for the pot, it was the utmost they could do. And yet, the heart of the child was set in sore and endless longing upon beholding the greatness of the two veiled Rubens. The whole soul of the little Ardennes thrilled and stirred with an absorbing passion for art. Going on his way through the old city in the early days before the sun or the people had risen, Nello, who looked only a little peasant boy with a great dog drawing milk to sell from door to door, was in a heaven of dreams whereof Rubens was the god. Nello, cold and hungry, with stockingless feet in wooden shoes, and winter winds blowing among his curls and lifting his poor thin garments, was in a rapture of meditation, wherein all that he saw was the beautiful fair face of the Mary of the Assumption, and the waves of her golden hair lying upon her shoulders, and the light of an eternal sun shining down upon her brow. Nello, reared in poverty and buffeted by fortune, and untaught in letters, and unheeded by men, had the compensation of the curse which is called genius. No one knew it, he as little as any. No one knew it, only indeed Petrushka, who being with him always, saw him draw with chalk upon the stones any and everything that grew or breathed, heard him on his little bed of hay murmur all manner of timid, pathetic prayers to the spirit of the great master, watched his gaze darken and his face radiant at the evening glow of sunset or the rosy rising of the dawn, and felt many and many a time the tears of a strange, nameless pain and joy mingled together fall hotly from the bright young eyes upon his own wrinkled yellow forehead. I should go to my grave quite content if I thought, Nello, that when thou growest a man, thou couldst own this hut and the little plot of ground, and labor for thyself, and be called Bas by thy neighbors, said the old man, yawn many an hour from his bed. For to own a bit of soil and to be called Bas, master, by the hamlet round, is to have achieved the highest ideal of a Flemish peasant. And the old soldier, who had wandered over all the earth in his youth and had brought nothing back, deemed in his old age that to live and die in one spot in contented humility was the fairest fate he could desire for his darling. But Nello said nothing. The same leaven was working in him that in other times begat Rubens and Jordans and the Van Eycks and all their wondrous tribe, and in times more recent begat in the green country of the Ardennes, where the Meuse washes the old walls of Dijon, and the great artists of the Patroclus, whose genius is too near us for us aright to measure its divinity. Nello dreamed of other things in the future than of tilling the little rod of earth and living under the wattle of roof and being called Bas by neighbors, a little poorer or a little less poor than himself. The cathedral spire, where it rose beyond the fields in the ruddy evening skies or in the dim, gray, misty mornings, said other things to him than this. But these he told only to Petrushka, whispering, childlike, his fancies in the dog's ear when they went together at their work through the fogs of the daybreak, or lay together at their rest among the rustling rushes by the waterside. For such dreams are not easily shaped into speech to awake the slow sympathies of human auditors, and they would only have sorely perplexed and troubled the poor old man, bedridden in his corner, who for his part, whenever he had trodden the streets of Antwerp, had thought the daub of blue and red that they called a Madonna on the walls of the wine shop where he drank his sou's worth of black beer, quite as good as any of the famous altarpieces for which the stranger folk traveled far and wide into Flanders from every land in which the good sun shone. There was only one other beside Petrushka to whom Nello could talk at all of his daring fantasies. The other was little Alos, who lived at the old red mill on the grassy mound, and whose father, the miller, was the best-to-do husbandman in all the village. Little Alos was only a pretty baby with soft, round, rosy features, made lovely by those sweet dark eyes that the Spanish rule has left in so many a Flemish face, in testimony of the Alvan dominion, as Spanish art has left broad sown throughout the country majestic palaces and stately courts, gilded house fronts and sculptured lintels, histories in blazonry, and poems in stone. And here we will leave our journey through Antwerp for today. We have walked through its ancient streets and glimpsed the history, beauty, and artistic spirit that Ouida sees in this remarkable city. At the heart of it all is Rubens, the great master whose presence seems to remain in the stones, the buildings, the very spirit of Antwerp. And perhaps this is one of the quiet ideas at the heart of this story. The things we create can live long after we are gone. Nello is still only a poor young boy, but something inside him is beginning to awaken. And as we continue, we will see where that awakening leads him. Thank you for spending this quiet time with me and for listening to Quiet English with Jacque. Please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a fan mail. If you have a story you think belongs here, a quiet story, a still story, a story worth sitting with, I would love to hear your suggestion. And if you are a writer with something gentle and true that you would like me to read and possibly read on this podcast, please send it to me. You can email me at jacqueeddievoice@gmail.com. Jacque is spelled Jacque, and Eddie is Eddy. Until next time, be still, be safe, and keep listening. God bless.